Hi there and welcome to our July 15th tutorial for World Watercolor Month. This is the reference photo we're going to use. The prompt is Dusty. The drawing for this is going to be really simple, and we're going to simplify this picture a lot because we're just going to capture that dusty, dry feeling of the desert. We're not going to worry about all of the individual desert plants or anything like that. So we're just going to do kind of some swashes of colors. This will actually be a pretty easy back to beginner tutorial. I feel like some of these tutorials have been a little more complicated than others, but this one we're going to keep super simple. We're going to start with drawing our horizon line, which interestingly enough, these mountains are surrounding us. So a lot of times I'm drawing our horizon straight across, but this actually we're going to take, it's a little off center. It's about here. We're going to take our line here, and then I'm going to use my ruler. Oops, sorry for clattering. And we're just gonna bring it to like here. It's kind of slight, but this is a perspective. It kind of comes like this, and then it kind of comes like this. That's a little dark. I'll lighten at the end. And then what you can see that's fascinating is that this mountain, yeah, okay. So this is almost like a hill, and so it's like there's like a hill here, and then it kind of extends around here, and then from there there's this mountain range, and this one starts kind of all like this point is off to the side. It's a little bit more this way, and it kind of just comes up, and it's pretty, there's not too much dipping and valleying or anything here. And then this one, it pops up and curves down a little bit, and then it comes off to the side here, but it's not quite as tall. You can see this one is taller than this one. Okay, and then in the background we have another mountain. See how we've got kind of a little dip here? That's about right where this mountain starts, and it's a little more there's some more elevation to this one. It kind of comes up and then comes like it's up and then down and then it's up. And I'm doing this very loosely. And then you can see that there's a second range that comes in like this, or it's part of the range, but a second mountain, and it kind of dips down like that. Okay, not exact, but close enough. And I think we're gonna, and so these are like these golden hills of kind of sand, and then there's like just this, there's a road here, but we're not gonna put that road in. Then there's like a layer of sand that's up closer here that kind of comes around like this. Okay, and it's kind of gravelly, and then there's like another kind of layer that goes here. But I think we're going to leave it at this. We're going to leave it this with these layers. Okay, I'm going to, if you want to, take a screenshot. This is really dark right here. But let me darken this up a little bit. There we go. I like that a bit better. I'm going to make this just a little bit more, it's a little too straight. There we go. I just want this to kind of flow. Basically, what we're trying to do is you've got these kind of layers that are folding into each other. And so that's what we want to get across on this image. Now, go ahead and take a screenshot of this. If you don't want to make your own drawing, you're welcome to screenshot and print this out. That's why I pause for a second to get a chance to do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and lighten my lines now. Sometimes I like to paint on a slight incline, and that's what I'm doing today. And I do that by placing a folded towel underneath of my clipboard. So I've got just a little bit of an incline. I don't always do that, but just felt right today. Little AMSR of the eraser pouncing. Okay, good enough. Now, hydrate your paints. I don't always say this, but this makes pulling your paint out of your palette so much easier. So we're going to go ahead and hydrate. And what I like to do is, before I start my sketch, I hydrate. I do my sketch, and then before I start painting, I hydrate again. And that allows that water really to sink in. And you can see, I just do a really light spray. I don't have water that's, the paints are glistening because the water's sitting on the surface, but there's no like big puddles of water. You don't want to dilute them down and create big puddles. So it's just kind of a light mist. And then, 10 minutes later, maybe another light mist. That's really going to help your paint come out of your palette. This is kind of a muddied up. I'm not going to worry about cleaning my palette because overall we're going to use some very muted colors. And so by mixing on top of a dirty palette, that's actually going to help me mute my colors even more. We're going to start top to bottom right now. We're going to start with the sky. I'm going to use my cobalt blue. This is a Daniel Smith color. But cobalt blue is just kind of almost like a denim-y jeans blue, right? There's not a lot of undertones of green in there. No, I'm mixing it on top of green, so you're seeing a little bit green. But the color itself is a pretty true blue color. The cobalt that I have does a little bit of granulating. That means that the pigment kind of settles into the texture of the paper a bit, and it gives it an extra bit of textury feel to it. All right, we're going to mix in quite a bit of water. You can see this is pretty diluted, and I'm using my size 14 round brush. This is a silver black velvet. It's a relatively inexpensive brush, so it's kind of a nice one to... The bigger the brush size is, often the more expensive the brush is. So it's like moderately priced, not the cheapest. And I'm just going right onto my dry paper. Now I'm going to I'm rinsing my brush, and I'm going to pick up some water. But what I'm going to do is, see how my brush is really full of water? I don't want that much water. So I'm just going to tap it on my sponge a little. And then I'm going to bring this in. Now I'm working on 100% cotton paper. So that means that I can go back in and work this a bit differently. If you're working on cellulose paper, you gotta be a little faster. Okay, by pulling up on an incline, my paint is gonna kind of run down a bit. I'm gonna just add a little bit more blue in there. And brush this out a bit more. Just make it a little smoother. It's not laying quite as smooth as I want it to. Ooh, this was... Okay, there's something called overworking, and I'm right on the verge of that. I'm add a little more water because I just want this to flow a bit better. There we go. Okay, now this back range is going to kind of, it's faded and fuzzy, so I'm going to just keep working forward, and my lines are going to blend in with one another, and I'm pretty good with that. And I'm going to take, this color is raw sienna, and I'm going to mix that right into my blue, and it's going to be kind of a greenish color. That's a little bit what we have in the picture. I'd probably add, I can see there's some undertones of purple, so we might add a little bit of that too. So now I'm just going to come in here for my back range, right? Like this. You can see my blue is kind of blending into there. That's good. That makes it look dustier. I'm going to add a bit of my permanent blue violet just to the edge of this. Well, I guess to the whole thing. That gives me a kind of grayish color, and I'm just going to kind of pick that in here. I'm just going to dot it in a few spots. You can kind of use a reference photo for where this kind of falls. And I don't have a lot of water on my brush because I don't want to get a big water balloon. So right now I'm keeping my brush, I'm just tipping in the paint color. The brush itself is fairly dry. Okay, now I'm going to add in just a bit more purple. Not a lot, but just a bit more. I want to have it still the undertone of that raw sienna, but I want to change the color a bit for this next kind of range, because it is in the photo, it is a little more purpley. Let's see, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to let them touch, and everything's just going to kind of blend together. We can go back in and we can add a little more definition if we want to. We might not want to, because this is supposed to be this very dusty feeling image anyway. Okay, and I'm going to add, there's a bit more of that, like in here you can see it's a bit more purpley, and in here. And that's almost, the color's almost a little bit intense, but one thing that happens with watercolors is they tend to dry. This is a bit more purpley too here. I'm going to just tip a bit in here. Now everything is still really wet on my paper, so I'm able to make these changes, and they're still going to fade in pretty well. Okay, so everything dries a little bit lighter. So when you put it on your paper, sometimes it looks a bit more intense than you want, but by the time it dries, it lightens up a bit. Now these foreground kind of mountainy, almost like foothills, right? These are low, smaller mountains. Or maybe they're called foothills. I suppose I should do more research before I start, but it doesn't matter. Our painting is just about being dusty. Okay, I'm gonna grab more of my, I'm gonna let some of that pink mix in actually, that was already on my palette. I'm gonna grab more of this raw sienna, which is this really nice, neutrally tannish color. Okay, and now we're gonna come in and we're gonna pull in the edges of this. Now this is not gonna, our paper's starting to dry, so we're not gonna get as much blending happening, and that's okay because this is in the foreground. Okay, and this one kind of comes down like this, and so for this part that is behind, so like this is sitting in front of that, we're gonna add just a bit more pink and maybe a little bit of purple, just to have kind of a differentiation of the, gray that out a little. Right, and see how I'm just kind of pulling up at my palette, and this is where having that dirty palette is really nice because I can kind of create these neutrally tints. Oops, that's not quite enough. Let's get a little more of that raw sienna in there. A little more raw sienna. Okay, and now we're gonna pull here because this is just a little darker here. All right. I'm not going to leave any real white there. And now we've got some shadows, but they're actually kind of greenish. So I'm going to pull some of this green. This is genuine, green apatite genuine that's sitting in there. And I'm going to pull some of that into this pinkish mix. And I can just see that I'm just going to bop it in here where this is and a little bit here. You can see there's just kind of this flow of color that kind of comes in, and same thing over here. I'm just tipping again. Remember, not a lot of water. That just gives it some interest. On this side, we're going to use the same color. And the reason I'm going to use the same color is because it's going to join together. Now, this is a little drier, so I'm going to just have to be a little, like this is going to come in a little bit differently. There we go. Oh, I like that. Okay. Like here, it's going to spread more, and here it isn't. I've got kind of a hard edge here, and I don't really want any hard edges. So what I'm going to do is just get my brush wet with clear water, but then I'm going to take off most of it because I don't want a water bloom, and I'm just going to soften that up a bit. I have to be really careful with that because you can pretty quickly push the paint away, and then you've got some weird spots. So, okay, I think this is looking really nice and dusty and distant. The next part, it just seems to get more and more sort of golden as we come forward. So we're going to take this same color, this same lovely tannish color of raw sienna. Get a little bit of water. There we go. And we're going to, and this is almost like a, there's some like, it's like a pile of sand, and what's happening when you look at the picture is that you've got stuff that's kind of bleached out a little bit here. So I'm going to just, I don't know if you can see, I painted the kind of stripe, and now I have just clear water on my brush, but not too much. I've taken some out with a sponge, and I'm just going to extend that up a little, right? And I'm going to do the same thing here, like just extend it so that we got this differentiation. Now when we get here, it's the same thing. It's really light and a little more pink. So I'm going to pull into that pinker side of things. And I'm just going to pull it in here. All right. And we're just creating these sort of layers of these dusty desert colors. Lots of texture, and that's good. Now I'm going to go even more like a pinky blue, which is sort of what the picture is. I might add a little bit of this purple. And we're just going to kind of fiddle around here. I don't know if that makes sense. And now we're going to do the front part. And I'm going to kind of, okay, we're going to go like this. This is way more pink than what is in the actual picture, but I really like the way it looks because we just got this really cool layery thing going. So we're just going to leave it. I love how everything mirrors. Now, we could do like one grayed out tree if we want to, just to give it a bit more interest. We could go back in and sharpen lines up if we want to. I might do a little bit of this kind of pinky purpley. I'm going to grab a little more purple. Here we go. I'm going to get just a little bit, just kind of mixing off my palette here and getting this kind of grayed out purple. And I'm going to add just a little bit here because in the picture, this mountain range is a little darker and it's getting a little lost, right? The fact that we've got a second one, that we've got two different things happening. Now I'm going to get my brush. I'm going to rinse it off with water. And I'm just going to use that to pull this out so that we get this still really soft. There. I like that. Okay. And if we want to fuzzy it up a little bit, because in the actual reference picture is fuzzied up a little, we can. Okay, I think that's good. Okay. Ooh, do you see I've got a couple water blooms here? That's okay. That means what happened is this was still wet when I painted this. This had more water in it than this did. So when I grabbed my puddle, I had more water in my brush. And then when I allowed this paint to touch this, it traveled that way and sort of exploded out. So we're going to be okay with that because there's nothing we can do about it. Like once the bloom happens, the bloom happens. So you just need to work with it. I can just leave it like that and keep it interesting. There is all of this greenery that sits here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this as I wasn't going to add in greenery, but now I'm going to because I want to sort of hide that bloom. And so I'm going to add a little bit of the green that I had used before, which is green genuine apatite. And I'm just going to go where this bloom is. And I'm just going to kind of cover it up by doing a little, yeah, and these are like these little bushes that kind of come up like this because they're deserty plants, right? And so I'm just looking at the shape, just doing some basic brush work. I'm just looking at the shape of what I have here in my reference photo. Yeah, I'm going to kind of do the same thing here. You can see they kind of like, this is a little funky, they kind of bend up. They kind of bend to one side and to the other, right? So we're just going to go like that. And then I'm going to do a few more to this side. Well, I'm going to do another one to this side, but I'm going to give it a little space. So I've got two. I'm going to give a little space here, and I'm going to put one here. And again, I'm using my reference photo as for my shape. I'm just thinking about the overall shape. I'm not thinking about every individual branch. And I'm not looking at this side of my reference photo and picking a bush out. I'm looking at all of those little scrubby bushes and deciding which one I like the shape of. And so I found one. It actually sits on the left side of the picture, but it's got an interesting shape because it kind of comes up like this. It's got a little extra fluff here. And then it almost like splits. That's what I think is so fascinating about these because I don't have this kind of, I live in the Midwest where we have great big green bushies. All right, I'm going to leave that. And then let's take this same color, but we're going to mix a bit more of the raw sienna into it to create something that's a bit more warm, a little darker, and a little more of the green apatite genuine. Okay, so now we've got this like kind of browny olivey green. If you have an olive green in your palette and you just want to pull from that, go ahead. If you want to use completely different colors, go ahead. You do what feels right to you. All right, I'm going to call that good. Now, we've got this kind of tree, and I'm gonna give it kind of a, because it kind of sits in the sand, I'm gonna just give it a spot for me to anchor from, and it comes up with different branches. I'm gonna do the outside, and then I'm gonna fill in the inside because that gives me kind of the shape that I want. And it just pops up and it's thin, and it kind of comes up, and then it splits off into like 2 or 3 spots, right? So I'm gonna do the outside for that side, and then I'm gonna do the outside for this, which kind of comes a little more like this. And if you like, okay, so I'm holding my brush like this so that it's perfectly perpendicular to my paper. Like if this were the side, I'm giving you a sideways view. And I'm being very light with it, and I'm letting it kind of I don't want to say bounce around, and I think my hand might be in the way so that you can't see that as well, but I'm kind of letting it jiggle and jaggle so that it doesn't, that's a new word, so that we get this interesting effect. I don't want it to be too perfect and straight, because these are not. And that one just kind of lifted up, so I'm going to let it. And then here we're going to come up and do like this little, like, there. Now here, I'm going to come up from the bottom again, kind of from this same area, because it's kind of thicker down in this space, you know, because all of these branches are coming from that spot. And I'm just going to do a couple more. And I'm almost giving my brush a twist, because when I do that, it forces the line to dance around a bit. And this is one of those things, like if you've got your painting and you really like it and you don't want to add it in, do not feel any pressure to add it in. Or if you're like, hey, I'd really like that, but I don't want it to not turn out, then this is the kind of thing that you could practice on a scrap piece of paper until you've got the technique that you want to add to your painting. And I'm just going to just add a few more in here, and we're going to just, there we go. Now, this looks kind of bunched up, and I don't have much of a definition to it, so I'm just going to bring in a little bit of definition. I'm going to bring it down so it's not a perfect line. Well, but it kind of is. So, all right, so we're going to go like that, and then I'm going to pull just a touch of my permanent violet into this color to give it a darker, see how I'm only using a tiny bit of permanent violet. So when I put a bit of permanent violet into this green Appetite Genuine, I can never remember the order of those words. It's just going to give me a nice little shadow color, and I'm kind of playing with it because one of the things I'm doing is waiting. I'm going to add just a little tiny bit more, and I'm just like the tiniest amount. And the reason I'm waiting a bit is because I want this to dry a little. If I touch it in there now, it's just going to explode all over. So we're just giving it a second to dry. I'm kind of taking a look at the rest of the picture. I'm really happy with it. I think this is so deserty. It feels like you're in a desert without having it to be, you know, you don't have to paint every single detail, or you don't have to have every line be just right. Okay, now I think it's time, and I'm just going to give a little shadow in here. And it just gives it a bit more definition. Maybe a little bit of shadow here. There. All right, I am going to leave this alone. This one is done. So thank you so much for painting with me for July 15th. This prompt was dusty, and so a desert photo felt just right. Let's take the tape peel. Take the tape off because that's such a fun part. I like how a lot of the color has just sort of blended in with each other. And then it's just a soft, kind of indistinct, yet you still see how these foothills and mountains are kind of curving into each other. And while I didn't think I was going to put any of the shrubbery greenery in there, I think that little bloom actually gave me a reason to put that shrub in, and now I like it better with that. I think it adds a little bit more visual interest. All right. And that's it. There we are. So tomorrow we'll be on July 16th. We'll be halfway done, which is super exciting. And if you stayed with me for all 15 days, that's awesome. If not, if you're just jumping in, that's awesome too. All right. Thank you so much for watching.